Destiny of a Savior by Famous Fault. Chapter 22. Who You Really Are. McGonagall turned to Kingsley, who addressed those who had stayed behind. She was amazed to see how many Slytherins had remained. Knott, Greengrass, Davis, Vasley, Miller, Shetty, Whitten. Most of them had Death Eater parents, yet still they remained to protect the school. Their bravery was admirable, worthy of a Gryffindor's even. They too had turned to Kingsley.
We've only got half an hour until midnight, so we need to act fast. A battle plan has been agreed between the teachers of Hogwarts and the Orders of the Phoenix. Professors Flitwick, Sprout, and McGonagall are going to take groups of fighters up to the three highest towers, Ravenclaw, Astronomy, and Gryffindor, where they have good overview, excellent positions from which to work spells. Meanwhile, Remus, he indicated Lupin, Arthur, he pointed toward Mr. Weasley, sitting at the Gryffindor table, and I will take groups into the grounds. We'll need somebody to organize defense of the entrances or the passageways into the school.
Sounds like a job for us! Fred yelled, indicating himself and George. Kingsley nodded his approval. McGonagall could only agree. Few people knew the secret passageways better than the notorious Weasley twins. Perhaps Potter did, but that was the only one still alive McGonagall could think of.
What about you?
Kingsley asked, turning toward Professor Marchesant.
What will you do?
For months he had been receiving news that no one really knew where Professor Marchesant stood. Everyone was rather uncertain. McGonagall was pretty certain that he was on their side. Nonetheless, she could understand the doubt the others shared. She looked at the expressionless man standing next to her. "It is about time you come clear of the things. Not only what side you are on, but everything. We can't deal with surprises." She did not really know what made her say it. Perhaps she was tired of hearing voices in her head. "I do not have much choice anymore," Mahad said, and stepped forward, just a single step, to create a decent distance between him and anyone present. McGonagall heard several shocked gasps as the professor seemed to melt on the spot. He was encased by a purple glow as his skin seemed to run on him. When the purple glow disappeared, McGonagall was sure that someone was playing a trick on her eyes. The person standing before them all was undeniably Professor Marchesant, or whoever he was. His white robes had disappeared and replaced with purple ones. These were wildly different from those he had discarded. These did not make him look like a wizard, but like a warrior. In his hand, he was holding a long green staff. All by all, he looked rather intimidating. "I am the dark magician," he said, unamused, although Professor McGonagall was pretty sure they were all gaping like fish. "And I will stand where I have always stood, at my Pharaoh's side." Here and there, Professor McGonagall saw understanding dawn upon the faces of some students. They, unlike her, had clearly some sort of understanding of what was happening. Those expressions were most pronounced on the faces of Harry Potter, Dean Thomas, Luna Lovegood, Neville Longbottom, and Tracy Davis. "You are a shadow creature?" Tracy asked, stunned. "Partly," he said, and turned towards the werewolf. "One could say I am a hybrid." McGonagall frowned. "Shadow creature?" she asked, confused, turning to Harry, who was closest to her. She recalled the creatures she had seen in Dumbledore's office. The lion, the wolf, the warriors, and not to mention the man who had taken their wands when Snape had attempted to kill Yugi. Harry nodded, his face dark. "It seems that way, but I don't understand." "How?" He shook his head and kept frowning. "Explain yourself," Kingsley demanded calmly, although he had his wand ready. He was not the only one with his wand aimed at the robed magician. The expression on the magician's face became almost saddened. "I will tell you. We do not really have time for the whole story, but I'll give you the short story." Nobody reacted. "Tell us," Bill said, who was sitting with the rest of the Weasleys at the Gryffindor table. "My name is Mahad, although now I am more commonly known as the Dark Magician. I was the childhood friend and, in a way, guardian over the Pharaoh. The very same person you know as the Spirit." "You knew him before his days?" Dean asked, interested, while the vast majority of the people present were trying to comprehend the information so suddenly stowed upon them. McGonagall was among them. "Pharaoh? Had Albus known?" Mahad nodded. "I have known him since the day he was born. His reign was short but good. He is the pharaoh responsible for the Egyptian Age of Peace, although he made a horrible sacrifice to make it happen."
"He sacrificed his memory, his name, and his soul," Harry said, stepping forward. Professor Mouton told Hermione the story. "What would happen to you?"
"I died in the beginning of the war. I was one of the 6 priests, the first to die. But since I did not feel that I had done enough, I chose to fuse my bob with my claw, becoming part human, part shadow creature. When my king and Yugi left the school, I decided it was time to interfere. Being part human, I can stand being away from my prison of shadows for an undecided amount of time. He does not know that I am here, Mad confessed. Why not? Tracy asked. Why did you not tell him? Miss Davis, you are aware about the fact that the shadow creatures are trying to get themselves destroyed. Tracy nodded. Since they lack the humanity I have left, they will do anything to have the shadows destroyed, including killing Rebecca. It was they who were indirectly responsible for Rebecca's death. They could have hindered it, but didn't. Her death was part of the puzzle that will lead to the destruction of the shadows, the Dark Magician explained, to everyone's horror. McGonagall was not the only one who could hardly believe the cruelty. Molly Weasley looked horror-struck as she heard the reason of Rebecca's death. What? That's awful! Tracy called out horrified. Mahad nodded, his face giving away that he agreed. McGonagall had never seen the mysterious magician quite so emotional. I know. The beasts from the Dominion also saved Professor Murdo's life after we escaped from the Malfoy Manor, Dean added darkly. Rio said they would not have bothered had it not been for the fact that they still needed him. The Dominion hardly ever meddles in the affairs of the living, but when they do, they have good reasons. The creatures from the Dominion want the shadows gone, as much as the shadow creatures themselves. It's such an incredibly dangerous power. I should know. I once wielded it myself. Panicked gasps and cries were heard throughout the great hall.
Have you wielded that power?
Kingsley asked, distrustful. At the beginning of the war, there were 7 of us who wielded this power, the Pharaoh and the 6 priests. Now it is just the Pharaoh. This world has been put through enough peril by the hands of this dark magic, and he guards the source of this power closely to make sure it never falls into the wrong hands. All the while, he, the shadow creatures, and the beasts from the Dominion are looking for a way to destroy them permanently.
Kingsley mumbled something nobody understood, then sighed exasperated. You said you stand at your Pharaoh's side. Where is that?
The man made a bow. I'd be honored if I were allowed to join you on the grounds.
McGonagall sighed and shook her head, choosing to leave it as it was. Instead, she turned to Potter. Potter, weren't you supposed to be doing something? She asked the Gryffindor, who was still looking at the magician with a troubled expression. Harry had hardly left the Great Hall before a loud roar was heard. The doors of the Great Hall were wide open, and several people screamed as the head of a white dragon came into view, soon followed by a body and tail. The dragon walked straight into the Great Hall, and everyone marveled at the size. It was remarkably small for a dragon. Sorry I'm late, a boy said before sliding off the back of the dragon. Professor McGonagall, Gog, who in Merlin's name came into the Great Hall on the back of a dragon. The boy seemed not to care about the shocked reactions. It took me a while to find the castle, since I can't actually see it. It's slowly getting better now, though. He squinted around, almost as if he could not really see the Great Hall. Then his eyes fell upon the Dark Magician, and instant recognition flew across his features. McGonagall sighed. Now, who was this?
Mokuba Kaiba, Mahad said, troubled. You should not have come.
I've been looking for you, Mokuba said. I need an explanation. I thought you were more than meets the eye. Hold that, Kingsley said loudly before the magician could reply. Everyone with the task aside, to your respective places. We are at war. We have no time for chatter. Go! People dispersed, quickly but unwillingly. McGonagall stayed. She sent a group of Gryffindors to the tower and told them she would join them soon. But first, she wanted to know what was going on. Who the hell are you? Kingsley asked, losing his patience. I know Kubakaila, and truth is, I still have no idea what I'm doing her. It was her idea, Mokuba said, and pointed at the dragon, as if that explained everything.
Mokuba Kaiba, you're Seto Kaiba's younger brother, aren't you?
Dean asked, and stood up. He and Tracy had also remained behind. How did you know? He asked, amazing everyone with his obvious obliviousness. Who the hell entered a world at war without knowing anything about it?
Professor Mouton and Rio Bakora have told us 1 or 2 things,
Dean said with a frown. He shared McGonagall's sentiment. At least Rio had known what he had gotten himself into. I have been looking for those 2, the boy said. Mokuba,
the magician said almost angrily. Do you know what you have gotten yourself into? No! Mokuba yelled. I don't! No one is willing to tell me anything! She shows up in the middle of the night telling me I am needed and that she'll lead the way. So, I'm here! I had absolutely no say in the matter! Mokuba, who until that point had tried to take it as it came, was slowly starting to find it all too much. Not to mention that you all know what actually happened and kept me in the dark! Do you know what it felt like to find out that Rebecca, Yugi, and Rio had all vanished from the face of the earth? Kisara, Mahad said and turned to the dragon. Why did you bring him here? It is not like you to put someone in danger, especially not someone as close to Seto. As expected, he received no reply from the dragon. Kisara? Mokuba asked, confused. Yes, the blue-eyes white dragon is, although it is hard to tell, like me. Part human and part beast. When she was still alive, her name was Kisara. I am willing to explain it to you, but only after this is over. Right now the castle is under attack. As Mahad said it, the castle shook violently, and McGonagall knew that it was the doing of dark powers. She will make sure you survive. It's her fault you are here. She better make sure you live to tell the tale. The dragon, to the surprise of the vast majority in the Great Hall, nodded. Dragons being part human, magicians turning into monsters, shadows. It looked like Professor Muto had done a whole lot more than he knew himself. Crabbe and Goyle were starting to notice that something was wrong with him. He had come to join them, like he had said he would, but his heart wasn't in it.
Draco, where are you with your mind?
Crabbe bit at him as they sneaked out of the line of evacuating students. They hid behind a statue as hordes of students passed them. Draco did not reply. His time at home, while Bellatrix was torturing their former history teacher, had hardly been pleasant. The screaming had made them all on edge, making them unable to function properly. He had not been sure what was worse, the screaming or the fear that the screaming would stop. Then Potter had been captured. He had not told Crabbe and Goyle about any of that. Potter had not been in their basement for longer than a couple of minutes. Leave it to Potter and his two friends to break out of a place that should be outbreak-proof. And he had helped them. Now, weeks later, he wondered if he regretted saving their hides. Sometimes he thought he did. Sometimes he didn't. Whenever he tried to figure out why he did it, he saw the broken figure of Professor Muto, half dead and in agony. It had hurt when the professor had told him that he was a good person. Pure, light, and innocent had been his words. He would never have been able to refrain from doing something after having heard that. It had been the first time in his life anyone had called him for a good person. Not even Dumbledore had.
Draco, what is wrong with you?
Crabbe asked, annoyed, when Draco stood there with a blank expression. Let's just go and thwart Potter, Draco sighed as he saw his old rival run past their hideout. Even though he had been the one to suggest it, he was also the one who put on the largest delay. He had so many doubts. Potter and his two friends had already reached the room of requirement when they at last got there. Draco was just in time to see the Weasley girl run off to join the battle.
Hold it, Potter,
Goyle said as they at last found Harry, standing in front of a blistered old cupboard. The green-eyed boy turned around to see the broad statues of Crabbe and Goyle. Draco hid behind the two, eyes cast to the ground. Then, in the corner of his eyes, Draco saw something he did not like. He looked up and pointed his mother's wand at Potter. That is my wand you were holding.
You get...
Potter started, but then changed his mind.
Not anymore. Winners, keepers. Malfoy, who lent you theirs?
My mother, Draco said, stunned. He was highly aware that Potter had just helped him out. Saying that he had given it to him would certainly have gotten Draco killed, one way or another. The look Potter gave him was unmistakable. Now they were even again.
So how come you three aren't with Voldemort?
Harry asked, and Draco could not tell if he really wanted to know, or if he was simply trying to distract them.
We're gonna be rewarded,
Crabbe said, sounding like a small child promised a large bag of sweets.
We are back, Potter. We decided not to go. Decided to bring you to him. Good plan, Potter said with mock admiration. Draco could only agree with his rival. It was a thoroughly foolish idea. So how did you get in here?
He asked, trying to distract them. Harry? Weasley's voice echoed suddenly from the other side of the wall to Draco's left.
Are you talking to someone?
With a whip-like movement, Crabbe pointed his wand at the 50-foot mountain of old furniture, of broken trunks, of old books and robes and unidentifiable junk, and shouted, "Descendo!" The wall began to totter. Then the top third crumbled into the aisle next door where Ron stood. "Ron!" Potter bellowed as somewhere out of sight Granger screamed. Crabbe and Goyle exchanged appreciating glances. A panicked feeling had started to find its way into Draco's stomach. This wasn't right. He had to do something. Potter pointed his wand at the rampart and cried, "Finite!" and it steadied. "No!" Draco shouted, stopping Crabbe's arm as the latter managed to repeat the spell. All three others looked at him with rather odd expressions on their faces. When Draco realized what he had just said, he desperately looked for an excuse. "If you wreck the room, you might bury this diadem thing."
"What's the matter with you?" said Crabbe, tugging himself free. "It's Potter the Dark Lord wants. Who cares about a diadem?"
"Potter came in here to get it," Draco said, knowing that Potter saw right through his bluff. He had no idea what the diadem was, and quite frankly, he did not care either. For all he cared, it could be buried for all eternity. "So that must mean—"
"Must mean," Crabbe turned on Draco with undisguised ferocity. "Who cares what you think? I don't take your orders no more, Draco. You and your dad are finished."
"Ari!"
Weasley shouted again from the other side of the junk wall. "What's going on?" "Ari!" Crabbe mimicked condescending while Draco felt his control slipping. "What's going on?" "Potter! Curse you!" Potter had lunged for the tiara. Crabbe's curse missed him but hit the stone bust, which flew into the air. The diadem soared upwards and then dropped out of sight in the mass of objects on which the bust had rested. "Stop!" Draco shouted at Crabbe, his world spinning and his mind about to explode. What the hell was wrong with him? He grabbed Crabbe's arm again. "The Dark Lord wants him alive!" He did not really know why he kept up with those futile excuses. "So, I'm not killing him, am I?" Crabbe yelled, throwing off Draco's restraining arm. "But if I can't, I will. The Dark Lord wants him dead anyway. What's the Draco pulled Crabbe away just before a red jet of light could hit him. Granger had fired a stunning spell at the large Slytherin. Crabbe was seething. "It's the mudblood of Avada Kedavra!" Before Crabbe could finish his spell completely, Draco had pushed him away with full force, using his entire body weight to move Crabbe out of position. No matter how strong Crabbe was, he could not withstand Draco's body weight and crashed into a pile of junk. Draco hardly able to stay on his feet from the impact himself. The green jet of light flew upwards and hit the ceiling instead. It was hard to say who was more surprised, he or Granger. He had, after all, saved her life. He who had hoped for her death a couple of years ago. She gathered herself quickly and shot a stunning spell at Crabbe. Goyle was furious. "What's wrong with you?" he shouted and grabbed Draco's collar. Draco's head finally exploded. Images, sounds, smells, and feelings all came flooding over him. He pulled away from Goyle, who let go when he noticed that Draco almost passed out. "Draco?" he asked, part of his anger gone. Draco couldn't answer. He fell to ground with unseeing eyes. These things in his head. The screaming. The people. The corpses. How could this be in his head? These memories, they could not possibly be his, although they felt familiar somehow, as if they really belonged in his mind. He clutched his head in a futile attempt to stop the horrors from entering his conscious mind. It was of no use. He vaguely noticed that it was shaking like a scared rabbit, and that it had gone eerily silent. He was, however, too caught up in his new memories to be able to care. The last thing he saw was the cold blue eyes of a man in a German uniform as he raised his weapon. Then it went off. Draco's eyes flew open, and to his surprise he saw Granger stand, bent over him with a concerned expression. "You remember, don't you?" she asked, as if she knew exactly what had just happened. "It can't be," he whispered. The images had stopped flooding into his mind, but they were still clear as day, one more horrifying than the other. "It'll get better," the mudblood said with an understanding smile, and she handed him a tissue. "It's a bit hard to deal with in the beginning, but you learn to live with it." "What have you done at him?"
Goyle demanded angrily, where he stood at one point by Potter. "His memories returned," Granger answered, more for Draco's benefit than Goyle's. "I don't know how he was able to summon them without outer help, but that seems to be the case. It doesn't really matter that it actually never happened. It is real in your head, and that's it what counts. It's traumatic." "Do you have these memories too?" Draco couldn't help but ask, as the image of him shooting a row of people, among them Granger and Longbottom. He was going to be sick. "Yes, Harry was the first to retrieve them, then I, And now you. It's really just the three of us who can recall them like any other memory. I know how it feels, Malfoy, but it's for the best, she said and dared a glance in Weasley's direction. How can this be for the best? Draco bit at her. It hurts. It is supposed to hurt, she said, not at all provoked by his tone. You were supposed to learn from it. When you got those memories, you changed. Now that you can recall them, you'll change even more. It's inevitable, but not necessarily a bad thing. Draco did some sort of attempt to fend her off with his arm. I don't need your pity. Yes, you do, Granger said to Draco's utter astonishment. That astonishment was shared by Weasley. What? Right now, you need someone who understands what you are going through. And for the time being, that is only Harry and me. And Professor Muto's spirit, but that's not an option at the moment, Hermione said confidently. You are deeply traumatized, and trust me when I tell you that it takes time to be able to function again. I'm your enemy! Draco bit at her, not really sure why he was still refusing help when he was clearly in need of it. His pride wasn't that bad, was it? Hardly, she snorted. As you might remember, you saved my life. Twice. First from the soldiers, and if what Harry and Ron told me is true, you did it again, on a more present plane. She crossed her arms. Deal with it. You don't want me, Harry, nor Ron dead. Perhaps once, but not now anymore. You didn't kill Dumbledore, Peter said, mixing himself in the conversation. And you were shot because you deserted. Goyle seemed utterly lost, but did not dare do anything. Potter still had his wand aimed at him and was more attentive than he pretended to be. His old crony and friend looked at Draco with an expression of confusion and distrust. What are you all blabbering about? Granger turned to look at Goyle. You have it too. Try to recall a train. Not the Hogwarts Express, but a train with barbed wire windows. Goyle's expression, if possible, became even more blank. Did all this really happen? Draco whispered and wished he had more control over his emotions. First he had turned to Moaning Myrtle, and now he was accepting help from Granger. He had sunken low. Granger frowned, thinking through an answer. In the physical world, no. But it happened in our heads the exact way it would have happened had it been real. Does it feel real? I recall sense. I recall freezing. I recall burning. How can it not be real? A small smile fluttered over the mudblood's face. I know exactly what you mean. Perhaps that was more real than this is. There we did not care what others thought. We were ourselves, so it's more truthful. Draco felt like fainting again. It was undeniably so that Granger was right. Did that make him a good guy? He didn't want to be a good guy. Didn't want to be a disappointment. What would they say if they knew what he had done? The Dark Lord would kill him. What do we do now? Weasley asked, looking first at Potter, then at Granger. Draco noticed that Weasley had found the diadem and was holding it as if it would bite him at any given time. Potter was holding Goyle's wand and Weasley Crabbe's. All thanks to him. That is our priority, Potter said and made a gesture at the diadem. Do you still have the fangs? I do, Granger said and quickly dived into a small beaded bag. She conjured rather large and sharp fangs covered with dried blood. Who? She asked with a rather troubled expression. I'll do it, Potter said with a clear expression of dislike. Draco didn't understand. They had been so eager to get it, and now they were getting rid of it. She handed him a fang. Weasley repositioned himself, so he had equal check on both Crabbe and Goyle, even though Crabbe was still out of it. Potter took the diadem and the fang and walked away. Go as far away as you can, Granger yelled after him. What are you doing? Draco asked, not really interested. Granger looked at him with an unexplainable expression, but did not answer his question. Get ready to run, she merely said and reached out a hand to help him to his feet. He ignored it and crawled to his feet on his own strength. He swayed from dizziness when he stood at last, and he grabbed a pile of junk to stay on his feet. What about him? Weasley asked and motioned at the unconscious Crabbe. Granger merely shrugged. Then she pointed her wand at Draco's old friend and said, Corpus. Crabbe was suddenly airborne. He tried to kill you, Hermione, Weasley said displeased. I would have left him here. Hardly, Granger snorted. Then the room was enveloped in something that could not be described as anything else but dark magic. He was putting up a fight, Weasley said as he stared in the direction Harry had ran off to. What's going on? Goyle asked, unable to hide the fear in his voice. Get out! Hermione said, meaning Goyle and Draco. When neither of the two reacted, she repeated, "Get out!" Her tone made them obey. Simultaneously, Goyle and Draco set off for the exit. A couple of seconds later, they could hear the footsteps of Weasley and Granger behind them. "Faster!" Weasley yelled. During a look behind himself, Draco saw a wave of dark magic coming towards them at a high speed. Potter was ahead of it, but only barely, and Granger was hindered by Crabbe. It was unlikely that either of the three would make it out of the room of requirement before the wave hit them. Draco and Goyle left the room of requirement at the same time, and although Goyle kept running, probably back towards the Dark Lord, Draco stopped. He turned to watch the progress of the others. Weasley had grabbed Granger's hand, slowing himself down, but increasing Granger's speed. Now not one of them left would be able to make it out. There were perhaps 2 meters left between Potter and the wave of dark magic. Then the wave stopped. It literally stopped dead, as if it had frozen in time. Draco hadn't even known that it was possible for magic to do something like that. Then he noticed that behind Potter a figure had appeared. It was dressed in rather odd purple robes. It had its arms stretched out as if he wanted to halt something. Who in the world was able to stop such a powerful wave of dark magic? "Professor Magician!" Potter called out when he realized that he was no longer being chased. Draco dropped his jaw. Was that really Professor Magician? It couldn't be. "Please," the unmistakable voice of Professor Magician called. "Call me Mahad." The wave of dark magic seemed to shrink until it was little else than a stationary puddle on the floor. "Now get out of here." Potter did not argue with the magician. He turned and ran off, Granger and Weasley doing the same thing. The magician did not run. He walked towards the exit, and the moment they were all out, he closed the doors. "I thought you were out on the grounds," Potter said, panting heavily as he turned towards the magician. Draco decided to stay on the spot and listen. He couldn't really go anywhere anyway. "I was. But I felt the disturbance when you destroyed the diadem. I decided you could use my help more than the others do," the Egyptian said. "I am returning soon, though. We are at a clear disadvantage, even though we managed to surprise them." "Surprise them?" Granger asked, who was still looking at the magician with certain confusion. Weasley, like himself, wasn't able to hide his utter confusion. "Take a look," Mahad said, and made a gesture towards the windows. All 4 of them went to take a look. "But that's the dragon that saved us!" Granger called out, confused. "The one who was together with Mokopakaiba! How did they find this place?" "Kisara found it for them. I don't really know why he is here yet, but there is a reason. She would never endanger him without reason." "Kisara?" Granger asked. "The dragon," Mahad explained before yells and shouts were heard from nearby corridors. Then 2 additional Weasleys backed into view. Percy and one of the twins. Draco couldn't keep them apart. They were dueling hooded figures. Draco went pale. What was he supposed to do? He was a traitor now. He knew it. Goyle must have informed them all that he had helped Potter and his friends. Potter, Granger, and Weasley quickly joined the other 2. Percy transfigured the minister with a joke to spare. "You actually are joking, Percy! I don't think I've heard you joke since you were—" the Weasley twin said with a huge smile. Then before Draco's eyes, the corridor exploded. One moment he was able to see them. The next they were obscured from view by wreckage that flew through the air. The magician was nowhere to be seen. It had all taken a split second. Draco was unable to comprehend what had happened in such a short amount of time. When the dust cleared, he sighed from relief. When he caught himself being relieved, he screamed in frustration. The magician, who had reacted much faster than Draco could have held for possible, had created a shield around the 3 Weasleys, Potter, Granger, and himself. They hadn't even been blown off their feet. "Thanks," the Weasley twins said before a whole row of additional spells hit the shield. The magician had the shield change shape and told them to get lost. The other 5 did not hesitate but set off. "Mr. Potter," the magician called out before they were out of earshot. "Can I have Mrs. Malfoy's wand, please?" Potter looked utterly confused, but tossed the magician the wand he had just taken from Malfoy before joining Granger and Weasley again. Then Mahad turned it towards Draco. "What are you going to do now?" Draco put on a sincerely confused expression. "I don't know," he said. I know about the things you recall. I also know that several Death Eaters know that you are a traitor. If you stay here, both the students of Hogwarts and the Death Eaters might attempt at your life." The voice of the magician was for once not empty of all emotion, but expressed genuine concern. "I can send you to Hogsmeade, if you want." "Why would you do that?" Draco hissed, not at all comfortable with being offered help by the Egyptian. "Because I believe you are not a bad person," Mahad said, and smiled.
Draco called out wordlessly in annoyance. Why did these people keep telling him he was a good person? Why?
"Mr. Malfoy, make your decision. I am going to return your wand to you no matter what you choose. I believe every man has the right to decide for himself, but I cannot stand around here and wait much longer. I can take you to Hogsmeade. There you will face people who will dislike you. No matter what you choose, you will face some sort of battle."
"I don't know!" Draco shouted. "I can't think clearly. It hurts. My head is on fire and I can't stop seeing these things. I'm not fit for battle. I can't do anything."
Mahad handed him his wand. Draco took it, but did not feel like using it. It felt simply wrong. "I'm sending you to Hogsmeade. It will be up to you to convince the children there that you do not wish them any harm. A word of advice. Find Rio Bakura. He knows about the things in your head, and he is a remarkably kind person. He'll help you." Draco nodded, too tired, too traumatized to argue. He did not really know how the magician did it, but seconds later he was standing at the beginning of the main street of Hogsmeade. He saw absolutely no one. He noticed he was freezing, but the meaning of that didn't really register in his head, which was too occupied with dealing with all those new memories. He walked forward, not really sure where he was going. Upon rounding a curve which the street made, he saw the last thing he expected. In neat rows on the ground, with even distance from each other, lay Death Eaters. Some students wandered among them, removing their masks and closing their eyes, almost as if they wanted to make them look more at peace. It did, however, not really work. Several Death Eaters looked like burned mannequins, as if being struck by lightning, or as if they had been burned alive. It was horrible, and it smelled so bad. The entire place reeked of death. Upon coming closer, Draco could see that there was a young Slytherin girl, 3rd year at highest, weeping at the side of one of the Death Eaters. An older boy in Hufflepuff robes was comforting her. It reminded him somewhat of an extremely small-scaled liberation. It was a freckled 6th year with Ravenclaw robes who spotted him first. He hastily alarmed the others, who reacted at once. Before he even had time to react, Draco was faced with a dozen wands from people in all houses. "What do you want, Malfoy?" Astoria asked venomously. He started, but did not really know what to say or do.
"I'm looking for Rio Bakura." "Why? To kill him?" the Ravenclaw boy asked. "We know you, Malfoy. You're one of them. You even have the Dark Mark."
"I am not one of them," Draco whispered.
"What did you say?" a Gryffindor asked loudly. "I'm not one of them! I don't want this! I don't want all this death and despair!" he yelled angrily. "So you fled the castle, how brave," one of them said sarcastically.
"What's going on here?" A pale figure emerged from the 3 broomsticks. His hair was long and white. He was clad in grey jeans, a striped shirt, and a blue jacket. His eyes were large and brown, and remarkably kind.
"That had to be Rio Bakura." "He says he's looking for you," the Ravenclaw boy said. "His name is Draco Malfoy. He says—"
"Draco Malfoy!"
the white-haired man exclaimed. Clearly the name meant something to him.
"Lower your wands," he told the angry students, who obeyed unwillingly. He walked forth until he was only a few meters away from Draco. Draco wondered if the man knew what he could do with his wand. "Yugi told me about you," he said. "I want to thank you."
"I don't deserve gratitude," Draco bit back, not really at ease with the kindness.
"I think you do. It was wise of you not to stay at Hogwarts." Then the albino smiled. "If it were up to me, no one would be at Hogwarts. I really hate fights. Why were you looking for me?"
"Professor Mahad told me to find you. He said you could help me," Draco explained with low voice.
"Mahad, right?"
Rio Bakura asked and bit his lower lip.
"Follow me."
The albino turned away from Draco, clearly not at all bothered by the fact that he turned his back on an armed wizard. Not that Draco would do anything, but it still amazed him how gullible Professor Muto's friend was. They entered the 3 broomsticks. The sight that met him was not really what Draco had expected. He saw several Death Eaters he recognized. Mulciber and Travers were among them. They looked up when Bakura and Draco entered the tavern, but reacted no further.
"What happened here?"
Draco asked, horrified, but also utterly confused.
There were rows of Death Eaters laying outside, and in here there were Death Eaters wrapped in blankets and drinking butterbeer. Something was wrong. They ambushed Yugi and me, so Tim fought them, Bakura said. He asked me to take care of the survivors. There are many injured upstairs. They're being taken care of as much as we can, though I have little hope for some of them. Right now I take care of those with mental traumas. Dealing with the shadows can easily lead to that. He can do that much damage? Draco asked, horrified, thinking about the people outside. Bakura nodded. In a matter of seconds. He is more powerful than he himself realizes. I think he feels bad. He had not intended to kill anyone, but it couldn't really be helped, I suppose. He sat down at an empty table and invited Draco to join him. He hesitated for a second, but then obliged. First off, I want you to know that I have absolutely no idea who Mahad is. Rebecca mentioned him a lot, but refused to tell me who he was. I only know he's on my side, Bakura said and handed him a butterbeer. Why were you to come look for me? Draco found that utterly strange. Why had they not informed their allies? Not that anyone connected to Professor Murdo had ever done something the natural way. He told me you knew about these memories in my head. Bakura's expression darkened at once. I'll see. The Second World War. Yes, I know about it. Yugi told me. I take it you know Tem was responsible for it. Draco nodded. I have been told, but he was in my memories too. I don't understand. If it makes you feel any better, Tem suffers from the same thing you are. It gets better, but it won't disappear. Bakura said. Granger already told me all of that, Draco bit. He did not need to hear the same words twice. Bakura was not really fazed by his unfriendly tone. You'll need someone who has gone through the same thing. I can't really help you, but tell you what I know. I can only tell you that I know it gets parable, that it changed you, and that it has given you a tremendous insight in how people function. I also know that for the time being, you don't really care. You just want the world to disappear. How do you know that? Draco asked, sincerely surprised. That was exactly how he felt. He wanted the world to disappear. You are not the only one with traumatic experiences, Mr. Malfoy, the albino said. Drink up and do as you deem best. We all deal differently. If you want to talk about it, you are welcome. If you want to rest, you can take one of the beds upstairs. If you want to relieve your anger, I suggest you go outside a little while and find something that is not too fragile. Can you just sit here a little while? Draco asked and clutched his butterbeer with two hands. Bakura nodded. Of course I can. A couple of seconds later, the girl who had been crying came inside. There were several students in the tavern, talking with low voices or just sitting together silently. The girl, who was younger than Draco had thought at first, walked straight up to Rio Bakura. My brother! She cried. My brother's dead! The expression on Bakura's face became inscrutable at once. It was an odd transformation. One moment he had that look of compassion in combination with deep thought on his face, and in a second it turned to something implacable, as if he was hiding something. He moved over, and the girl sat down and nuzzled close to him. He put a single arm around her in comfort. Draco understood her. There was something almost healing over the albino. His mere presence could make everything seem a little less hopeless. Even he felt that way. He with all his horrible memories. I'm sorry, the albino whispered, too low for the girl to catch. Draco closed his eyes and shook his head a little. Professor Muto, Professor Mashishan, Rebecca, and now Rio Bakura. How in the world could people like that exist?